This came across my radar. I wanted to share it with you. It's a piece in the American Conservative called Postcard from Pre-Totalitarian America. It's a, catchy headline. I guess it just got published. Yeah, just published this week. And this is how it goes. Last year, I spoke to a Soviet-born scholar who teaches in an American public university. I'm using a quote from our forthcoming from our discussion in my forthcoming book, Live Not by Lies. This morning, she sent me this email, which I reproduced with her permission. I want to read to you from this email because it really does get at what I'm saying to you, which is even if we defeat Sanders' socialism in either the primary or the general election, there's something very wrong with the American left, particularly among the young today, that the virus of socialist authoritarianism has spread in a way that I'm not sure this is going to be a one-off. I don't think that Bernie Sanders as a socialist nominee, this isn't the last time we're going to see this. If anything, Democratic Party, the momentum of it for the last 20 years has been consistently pushing in this direction. Certainly Obamaism was far left. I mean, Obama, people forget, was the most left-wing senator in the Democratic Party by voting record when he was elected president of the United States. So they already elected the most left-wing guy in the Senate by voting record, who was a Democrat. And I think at the time, technically, Bernie Sanders may have been an independent, but so he was either number one or number two. All right, he was a very far left guy when he was a senator, and then he became president of the United States and did a lot to push forward policies that were really bridging mechanisms between the more free market and capitalist-oriented society we have been living in and an increasingly statist and socialist one. This is the letter that Rod Dreher wrote, or that he reprinted, rather, from a Soviet-born scholar about what she's seeing among the youth on the left today, youth really in general, because most of them are leftists. And this gets also to, I think, the Bernie bro mentality, where you have these 25 and 30-year-olds who are big Bernie Sanders supporters who are just maniacal about how anybody who stands in Bernie's way, even Democrats who stand in Bernie's way, they shouldn't be convinced. They should just be destroyed. They should be shoved aside. They're a part of the problem. Here is what was written here. I know from your blog that the work on your new book is going well, and I'm glad because, boy, it is so needed. I'm observing some disturbing developments on my campus, and we are really not one of those wokester schools for spoiled brats one normally associates with this kind of thing. This academic year, I've had an opportunity to work with some early career academics. These are newly minted PhDs that are in their first year on the tenure track. What's really scary is that they sincerely believe all the woke dogma. Older people, those in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, might parrot the woke mantras because it's what everybody in academia does, and you have to survive. But the younger generation actually believes it all. Trans women are women. Black students fail calculus because there are no calculus professors who, quote, look like them. Whiteness is the most oppressive thing in the world. The U.S. is the most evil country in history. Anybody who votes Republican is a racist. Everybody who goes to church is a bigot, but the hijab is deeply liberating. I gently mocked some of this stuff, like we normally do among older academics, and two of the younger academics in the group I supervise actually cried. Because they believe all this so deeply, and I'd even say fanatically, that they couldn't comprehend why I wasn't taking it seriously. The fanatical glimmer in their eyes really scared me. Back in the USSR in the 1970s and the 1980s, nobody believed the dogma. People repeated the ideological mantras for cynical reasons to get advanced in their careers or get food packages. Many did it just to protect their kids. But nobody sincerely believed it. That is what ultimately saved us. As soon as the regime weakened a bit, it was doomed because there were no sincere believers anymore. Everybody who did take the dogma seriously belonged to the generation of my great-grandparents. In the U.S., though, the generation of the fanatical believers is only now growing up and coming into its prime. will have to wait until their grandkids grow up to see a generation that will be so fed up with the dogma that it will embrace freedom of thought and expression. But that's a long way away in the future. I'm mentoring a group of young scholars in the humanities to help them do research, and I'm starting to hate this task. Young scholars, almost without exception, think that scholarship is entirely about repeating woke slogans completely uncritically. Again, this is different from the USSR, where scholars peppered their writing with the slogans, but always took great pride in trying to sneak in some real thinking and real analysis behind the required ideological drivel. Every Soviet scholar starting from the 1970s was a dissident at heart because everybody knew that the ideology was rotten. All of this is sad and very scary. I never thought I'd experience anything worse, anything more intellectually stifling than the USSR of its last 2 decades of existence. But now I do see something worse. The book you are writing is very important. I hope that many people hear your message. So we'll have to have Mr. Dreher on to talk about this book, Live Not by Lies. It sounds very interesting to me. But for somebody who lived for decades in the Soviet Union to come out and note this difference, I think this is something a lot more people need to hear. That the wokeness that I often make fun of and that you understand to be intellectual rot, and that it is just drivel, and that the origins of these ideological points of view are always are systems that have already been tried and failed, are beliefs that have been shown to be lacking in terms of nurturing the human spirit, lacking in terms of creating good societies that people want to live in. This is all rooted in lies, in untruth. And this is now becoming so commonplace among younger people in particular that we have to wonder what the future will really look like. Do we think, for example, that someone who is 25 or 20 right now, let's say 20 for kids who are in college age, that really believes some of the things that this professor laid out there, like trans women are women? If you've gone around mouthing that slogan, which is absurd, right? It's not trans women or trans women. That could be, that you can say is true. You can talk about that, fine. But trans women are not just women, because then what are women? I mean, you get into the definitions here and you understand that there's an intentional perversion of language that's taking place and a changing of language to go along with it, whereby now plural pronouns are required for individuals. And the gender issue, by the way, conservatives spend a lot of time talking about this. And I think now the attack on us for it is always what we're picking on this, what is a very small group percentage-wise of the American population, very small group globally. And there's a sense that because we focus on this, that we're picking on trans people. I would never pick on trans people. They're people just like everyone else, and they're deserving of respect and kindness and decency just like everyone else. But the leftist ideology behind the trans movement is something that we have to be able to talk about and discuss. And the way that they're co-opting or changing language to suit their political preferences and all of this is really, really unsettling. And we should all be very aware of that. We should start to understand that people who think this in their 20s are not going to wake up in their 30s and all of a sudden be reasonable constitutionalists who think that rule of law has to mean a respect for the system even when you don't like the outcome. And liberals, because this appeals, right? This appeals to people's sense of self-righteousness and their emotions. Liberals have created a world in which when the rules are in their favor, the rules are sacrosanct. And when the rules get in their way or don't work out the way they want them to, they are to be abandoned or undermined, discarded, any of the above. And that's why I thought this letter from this former resident of the Soviet Union saying that this is really troubling. And remember, the point here being that people in the Soviet Union, in academia, she's talking about young PhDs, people that are now, they are, let's say, 25, maybe 25 to 30 in that range. Young PhDs who think that the that academia shouldn't be about the pursuit of truth, including difficult truths, and instead should be about the propagation of ideology, not merely because it's useful in the academy, so that's an opportunistic belief, but the propagation of ideology because they really, truly think that this is the way. That's not going to, those people are not going to change. They're not going to grow up. They're not going to start teaching, the great classics of literature and stop referring to it as a province dominated by dead white males and how that's so not woke. And, we need to read more, literature from cultures that in some cases don't have a very long history of literature and not a lot of stuff to read. I mean, you really get into this. You say, well, where is this going to take us? And I think that it takes us to some pretty frightening places very quickly. That's why also the Bernie Sanders situation really bothers me. It's troubling enough that he's even a front runner right now in this Democrat primary. When you listen to what he's suggesting, what he's saying, Bernie Sanders is going to make sure that if he became president, he's going to make sure that this country is less free, less prosperous, and with that, let's be honest, less happy. But as long as we are equally sharing in a greater degree of misery, he's fine with that. That outcome is better. He says he's just going to pull down billionaires, but in the process, he's going to be pulling down people who have worked very, very hard to try and create more freedom, more options, more security for themselves and their families. Because ultimately, he doesn't think, and this is true of AOC, it's true of Bernie, it's true of Warren, he doesn't think that whatever you've done to get where you are is something that you can claim to have been your own. It's the government that allowed all of that. You didn't build that. This is the line that Obama said that was a much greater window into the mind of the contemporary leftist than was intended with that line. You didn't build that. Well, if you didn't build it, if you don't have ownership of your own time, your own labor, your own decision-making, if the state gets to determine all of that, what does that turn into for America as a society? Already we've allowed, as a country, far too much socialism to creep into our system. And the state is a much larger presence in our lives. The big S state, the federal government, is a much bigger presence in our lives than it should be. And we have to deal with that all the time. And we have to try to find ways to push back against it. And it has not been very successful recently. Donald Trump comes along, and I think a lot of us feel like this may just be a reprieve from the rampant statism of the left. It may not be a sweeping victory that changes the trajectory of the country. And that's when I look at the young people and what they're saying. The young people, I mean, I'm 30. God, I'm 38 now. Bruce and Mark, I'm almost 40, man. You realize this? I feel like we could have been in like high school math class together. And then I sit here, I look at you, and I'm like, my God, when I was in high school math class, you were actually in diapers.
What year were you in high school math class?
I mean, let's say I would have been in high school in 1996.
Yeah, I was 3.
Okay, so maybe are you out of diapers at 3? I don't know how that works.
I don't know.
Kids, but yeah,
I'm not a kid guy.
Yeah. I'm not yet either. Yeah. But yeah, you would have been very, very young.
Yeah.
So when I say the youth, though, can you explain to us why your peers, you're millennial.
I'm millennial.
You're barely a millennial because
you're
about
a gray beard millennial.
And you're a no beard millennial.
Yes.
So can you explain why the people of your age are so crazy?
Maybe something's in the water.
Would you say most of your friends, are they politically active? Do they care, or are they just running their lives and like this is all a distraction to them?
I have a few here or there that will be politically active, but I don't really talk politics with my friends.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Maybe this is a helpful reminder then. I feel like when you work in politics and you're constantly looking at the ideology, I want a country where that's actually the standard, where people don't have to think much. We should all think about ethics and about the good life and about what we should do with ourselves and our time and have the freedom in those pursuits. But I wish that there was much less of a focus on politics as really a form of personal branding, because this is what ends up happening. Everyone just sits around. When I was in D.C., People just talk politics all the time.
I mean, I'm a little different that I have to listen to this every day.
Yeah, no, I know.
kind
I'm,
of a captive audience,
propagandizing from the right for producer Mark all
But
the time. So
before I had this job, I wouldn't go around talking politics with my friends. I wasn't as informed because I didn't want to be, because it wasn't part of my life.
yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for a lot of people, I think that it's become such a part of identity, and that's why you have all these Hollywood actors who aren't religious and I think are looking for purpose, and they latch on to purpose in the guise of climate change activism and all these leftist causes that ultimately I think are just empty. They fill it with the promise of helping the poor, helping the world, helping the downtrodden, but they really don't do that. They just mouth these slogans. They just say the things that they believe they're supposed to say, and much of it is, I mean, there's a reason people do virtue signaling. It's because it's a form of self-aggrandizement. It's look at how great I am, and that's behind a lot of leftism today, a lot of activism on the left today. So young people believing the crazy stuff from the left today more than even Soviet scholars. When I say young people, young scholars today believing in suppression and censorship as not a thing they have to put up with, but a thing that is good, and juxtaposing that with what was going on in the 1970s and the 1980s in the Soviet Union, that's sobering, my friends.
Yeah, the wall is being built. You know, we're up to 122 miles. 122 miles. And you'd think that that was not easy, but we got the money and we're building it, and we won a lot of cases in court. We were sued all the way along the line, and we're up to 122 miles. In a very short time, we'll be over 500 miles. It's already had a tremendous impact. So the wall is moving along.
I hope that the wall keeps moving along. This is an important promise. I also want to give you something a little bit upbeat after all that talk about the Soviet mentality overtaking young scholars in America. In some ways worse than the Soviet mentality. I felt like we should have a little bit of happy time, and so that's where I brought out the Trumpster, and he's incredible what he's been able to do so far, and the fact that he's still so full of fight and so vigorous in his defense, not just of the administration, but now of capitalism and of American patriotism. You can't escape that the Democrats really come at this with a view of how much America needs to be transformed because America is deficient in so many ways. Trump is such a powerful voice out there for, no, this country is actually amazing, and people who live here are lucky, and we want to preserve what is best in this country and continue on a path of increased prosperity and freedom and individuals being able to pursue their destiny. I mean, that's what we really want. And Trump gets that done. And I got to say, it has been amazing watching him put up with all the nonsense, all the efforts to remove him from office, destroy everybody around him. And you see him at these rallies like he was last night, and you still get the sense that Trump is just loving it. He loves it. He loves the fight.
It's time for roll call.
So, team, I want to ask you all a little favor here, actually. I want to ask you if you could, especially if you're already a podcast listener. It turns out that they are doing a podcast of my show on WOR, which is the additional 4th hour of radio that I'm now doing every night. And you just go to 710WOR.com/Buck, and you can hear that show. And if we show some Team Buck numbers there, that would be really helpful. So if you're already, especially if you're already a podcast listener, download that one too. That show flies by. It's only 1 hour, which means in podcast time, because we don't have the traditional radio broadcast breaks on the podcast side of it. You can get through that podcast very quickly, and especially if you want to know what's going on more in New York City, the New York City area. So that's where you go, 710WOR.com, 710WOR.com/Buck. And you can go right to the page. There's a nice photo of me, and you can listen on demand there. Let's get to DJ, who writes in first on roll call. I keep hearing Bernie say healthcare is a right. Why is nobody calling him out? The rights are outlined in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. If Bernie feels health care is a right, and as long as he has been working in government, he should know there's a process for creating a new right called an amendment. Why is he not using the known system instead of trying to force what he feels is a right? This tells me he knows it would never go through the process to become a right. Jesse Kelly and Fox, etc., are not on this topic of this also. Why? Even if he gets elected, it will still not be a legal right. It takes an amendment, if I'm not mistaken. Well, DJ, he's, I see your point. Bernie Sanders is intentionally conflating what he thinks of as a right with what is a right as a function of law. I mean, no one has when you say you have a right to health care, what does that mean? Just think about that what does it mean? So you have a right to demand what? Do you have a right to say that you want let's say I'll make this personal. I have essentially two severed tendons on my right ankle and what's called a cavovarus foot, which means you have a super high arch, which, unless you're a ballet dancer, is not a good thing. It actually creates real instability. It means you're very susceptible to catastrophic ankle sprains and breaks. And the surgery for it is pretty intense. It's called a calcaneal osteotomy. And if I want to have that surgery, okay, so I know that's a medically necessary thing. I haven't done it yet. So healthcare is a right. All right, now do I get to walk into the most reputable hospital in New York City for this? Some would probably say it's HHS hospital, or HSS rather, Hospital for Special Surgery, and demand that their top surgeon give me a date in the next few weeks to do my surgery, and they take whatever money my insurance happens to feel like giving them. Is that what it means to have a right? Or do I have a right to wait 3 years and have some doctor who went to, medical school in French Guiana or something, and now is going to, operate on me in between selling ShamWows on the weekend? I mean, is that my right extends to what point? If it's not based in free markets and individuals coming together and an insurance system that's actually insurance instead of what we have, which is just a very complicated cross subsidies, am I able to just walk in and demand that the best surgeon in New York City operate on my ankle? Why not? I thought it's a right. Oh, no. You see, you know who's going to answer this question for you? A bunch of bureaucrats. That's what Bernie Sanders wants. Bernie Sanders wants government bureaucrats who are unaccountable to you, who you won't even be able to get on the phone, who you can't get fired, to come up with policies in Washington, D.C., come up with decisions in Washington, D.C. about what doctor you can see, how quickly you can see that doctor, what services that doctor will cover. And Bernie Sanders wants you to believe that's going to be a good outcome for you. Do you really think that that's possible? You really think that that's true? No one who and that's why I made it sort of personal. Do I think that I'd be able to go get a great surgeon to take care of my very messed up ankle? Do I think I'd be able to get a great surgeon to do that in a Bernie Sanders world where we have Medicare for all? Absolutely not. Because guess what? Everybody else who wants to have surgery, orthopedic surgery, everyone else in New York City, they can do Google searches too. They know what the reputations are of different facilities, different doctors, and they're all going to want to go see this doctor. And is he going to get paid enough that he's going to even want to stay in practice and accept the Bernie Sanders Medicare for all? Or is he going to say, no, I'm only seeing patients who pay cash, who run a credit card at my front desk, and then I'll perform surgery? And what if Bernie Sanders' administration says that this super whiz doctor only can take reimbursements for his procedures at a level that won't cover the overhead of his facility, won't cover the insurance that he has to pay for malpractice, et cetera, et cetera? Maybe he just shuts down, or maybe he goes, elsewhere to practice medicine, right? This is the reality of healthcare. Bernie Sanders is giving you a mythology of healthcare. It's never going to be what he says it is. He keeps saying Medicare for all. It's not Medicare for all. Medicare has co-pays. Medicare doesn't cover everything. Medicare is something that people have paid into. There's a number of things. Remember, Medicare for all you're not paying into this over time. This is now just the general fund. It's more expensive than we already have, and Medicare is already too expensive, and doctors don't want to take it. We're running this experiment. Bernie Sanders is waging a war on history because we've done the things that he wants to do, and it does not turn out well for us. And he just ignores this. He tries to pretend that we don't have the information that we do, that we don't know what's really going on here. Anyway, so I know that was a long thing about healthcare, but I just feel like when you personalize it, and as I've said to you, this is like when I talk about rent control. I've lived in really tiny, rinky-dink apartments in New York City. I've had great insurance, I've had terrible insurance, and I've had no insurance and had to deal with doctors under all those circumstances. So I can draw from these personal experiences to tell you that there's just no way what some of these politicians are telling you is true. It's going to be true. And I guess for some people, they'd rather live with the hope from the fantasy than deal with the reality. And that's really that's at the heart of Sandersism. That's what Bernie Sandernista is all about. Richard, Buck, this debate tonight has been like watching Bloodsport. Kumite. Producer Mark, you've seen Bloodsport, right? Shut the front door. No way. You haven't seen Bloodsport? Do I have to? Will Mrs. Mark let you come over for like a movie night one night? Like I'll have like my brothers over. They love Bloodsport too. You got to watch Bloodsport, man. I'll bring it in. We'll order Chinese food, gluten free, and we'll sit here and watch.
Oh, well, you're kidding me there with the gluten-free
Chinese food is good. I will have you know.
Sure,
I don't want to hear this nonsense from you. Did you ever watch martial arts? Were you ever in the martial arts movies?
Not really.
They were a huge thing in the 80s and even into the 90s a little bit. But then I think people here's my theory about this. That people realized because of MMA that training to actually be having some 90-year-old monk who can catch a fly with his fingers or something and has like a long silver beard, that guy's actually not going to beat 20 dudes in a fight. Like that's not reality at all. And the people that actually can fight with their hands train to fight with their hands and are in very good shape because also being strong and fast does matter. You don't just like meditate enough and you're a ninja warrior who will defeat everyone. And that was kind of or do a lot of spin kicks. And someone's going to write it. Someone always does like, Book, I'd knocked a guy out with a spin kick in a street fight. Okay, well, good for you. Spin kicks are not a good idea in a self-defense situation.
It sounds like an accident if you do it correctly.
Oh, my God. If I did, I'd pull a hammy.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah. I got to stretch beforehand. My spin kick would be at like waist level. So if that. All right. Anyway, so he has not seen Bloodsport. It's Van Damme's best movie. Have you seen any Van Damme movies?
No, probably not.
There is one where there's an ice hockey rink.
Oh,
involved.
wow. What,
Sudden
in the background?
Death. He actually fights an ice hockey mascot.
Mm.
So maybe that's the one we should start with for you to see.
Okay. I'll get on that.
There you go. Producer Mark has homework. Warren has been Van Damme screaming in slow motion as Bloomberg is stunned, spraying cash as he falls down. This whole NDA thing is amazing to watch. Trump's ladies who signed NDA spoke anyways, no repercussions. Why is it that the Bloomberg ladies who signed an NDA won't speak? It smacks of the Voldemort whistleblower double standard. Shields high. Richard, I think even if these women, look, I don't believe that, I don't believe that Bloomberg, he's too cautious and too tactical to, and I think more than that, I think we would know if he had done any really bad stuff to women in his company and his employ. He's a little crass and he makes comments because he's a billionaire and he's used to being able to say what he wants. Let's be honest, on the right, guys, we're kind of used to that now, right? I mean, crass billionaire who says what he wants. Let's not, we're not pearl clutching. It's Democrats who are doing all the pearl clutching over this. We're like, he said some stuff. He's apologized, and, it's time to move on. It's not like that these NDAs were waived. You'd find out that Bloomberg was running some, sex dungeon out of the Bloomberg news offices or something. That's what I'm trying to say. That's not this guy. So it's not a game changer either way. And I think the media is much more invested in this being a big deal than anybody else. Penny, did we ever actually hear who won in Iowa? Yes, Penny. Turned out Mayor Pete Buttigieg got the most delegates. Bernie Sanders got the most in raw vote total in Iowa. Although I believe Sanders and Buttigieg are both asking for a recanvass of a few counties there. So the answer is Kinda. Anyway. Bill writes, illegal aliens are not more American than most Americans, but I can argue that many of them are ideologically more American than most libs. At least they see this country as somewhere they want to be and are willing to work for what they get. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an illegal alien advocate, but given a choice, I would happily trade the farm workers here in the Central Valley of California for Antifa, Bernie Bros, and half of Congress. Bill, look, I think most illegal aliens that you're going to come across, vast majority of them, 99% of them are nice people who are just trying to get a better situation for themselves. And I have human sympathy for them. There's no question about it, right? They want to leave, usually crappy, dysfunctional countries or crappy, dysfunctional economies and come to a much better one. But we also have to protect the economy we have and the country we have, and sovereignty is important, and we have laws. And also, there is a very small subset of illegal aliens who do commit really terrible crimes here, and we have to factor into this that they shouldn't be here at all in the first place. So those crimes should not have occurred. They shouldn't have been able to occur. So, Bill, thank you so much for writing in. All right, more roll call here. Kristen writes in, I also saw Parasite, and unless you like movies that show people just being cruel to others for no reason other than to make themselves happy, you won't like it. I actually walked out after 45 minutes. I couldn't take it anymore. By the way, I love Train to Busan too. Maybe I'll have to watch the trailer for Train to Busan and have like a little conversation about this. We should do like a Buck and Mark Mystery Science Theater thing, where we watch a movie and do the commentary on it, because I'll try to give the movie a little bit of credit. Producer Mark will be salty and unimpressed.
Don't we need like rights for that and stuff? We can't just put a movie
Yeah,
on YouTube,
that's technically true. Yeah, maybe we're back to the cooking idea then. So
I think cooking works better because nobody can copyright cooking.
Yeah, they can't copyright my steak. They better not. They better not try to. That would be bad news. You haven't seen Train to Busan, I'm assuming.
No, is that a Brandon movie?
Yeah. Zombies, like eating people's faces. In
They
Korea.
all have the same storyline.
Yeah.
Zombies come up, they
eat people,
yeah.
scary, and then, bad things happen.
Give me a movie with like a plot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Producer Brandon, we got to get him in here. He can have a little discussion about this. A little bit there. I think he would want to stand up for his horror movies.
I'm sure he would.
A little bit. Andy's next up. Shields High. The miracle on ice was our amateur college kids beating a de facto Soviet professional team. The Olympics jumped the shark after the Cold War ended by allowing professional athletes to participate. So yeah, that was I think what I said yesterday, that we had amateurs playing. So we did not have NHL players on that miracle team. Right?
No. It was a couple years later, maybe in the 90s, that started.
So that was our amateurs. And the Soviets were like, we're going to inject them with steroids and then pay for everything.
The best players in the world.
Right. Yeah. And the Russians are still very good at hockey, right? I see all these names of hockey players that are like the best, and I'm like, that guy came straight out of St. Petersburg.
I mean, nobody's going to beat Canada if you're going pros versus pros. Canada almost always wins.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
Canada's the best?
Really? You're
I thought
surprised
Russia was
by
better
that?
than Canada at hockey. No?
No.
Oh.
Canada is where hockey was, born.
I guess it is kind of cold up there.
Kinda.
Yeah, I've heard stories. I've only been to Canada a couple of times.
Really,
so.
I've been to Toronto.
Canadians are lovely
place,
people.
Yeah.
I really like Canadians a lot, so I feel like I could handle it up there, except for the cold. I'm not a super cold weather person.
I said to my wife when we went, Toronto's like a clean New York.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah. People tell me Vancouver is actually amazing.
I've never been. I would like to go.
Yeah, I would like to go. That's the
one.
one place in Canada I really want to check out. I know people go to Montreal for like fun weekends, but I hear that Vancouver is actually, and the real estate market there is completely nuts. People are spending like $1 million for a tiny little shack by the side of the road. All right, Eric. Hey, Buck. It must be a geographical thing because I've never heard of anyone who hasn't heard of tri-tip. No, I've heard of it. I just don't know what it is. It's not like Amy Klobuchar, who did not know who the president of Mexico is. López Obrador. AMLO. Here in SoCal, tri-tip is probably the most common and loved cut of them all. It's affordable and you can cook it several ways. Smoked tri-tip that is seared in butter on a cast iron skillet at the end is the best. I don't know if you have the restaurant Lucille Smokehouse in New York, but they have good tri-tip. I've never heard of that restaurant, but I will take a look. David, hey Buck, love the show. Listen to you discuss how the brain works with depression and food makes sense. When I'm depressed, I go straight to Burger King. While my wife is depressed, she chugs chocolate. Food can make you feel better even for a little. This works. This is worth looking more into. David, yeah, man, food is very important for a lot of things, including, I think, how we feel and our energy and our immune systems, and I think food really does matter. With that in mind, I'm going to go make myself some bacon and scrambled eggs as soon as we're done here. Team, please check out the WOR Show podcast, 710WOR.com/Buck. Download it so you make Buck look good. Talk to you tomorrow. Shields high.